Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll get going. So, hopefully, everything is working. Welcome to Infrastructure as Code Live. Today, we're going to be looking at any sort of infrastructure as code questions you might have, and we're going to also be taking a look at Farmer, which is a tool that will allow us to hopefully simplify some of our infrastructure as code when deploying to Azure. So we'll have a look at that, and in between, if you've got any questions about that or anything else that's infrastructure as code related, just pop them in the chat and I will be more than happy to answer them. Just make sure everything is working. I think so. Okay, so yeah, we're going to have a look at Farmer today. So Farmer is a third-party tool for doing infrastructure as code on Azure, and it's been written by I forget the gentleman's name. So let's have a quick look at the GitHub repo. So yeah, Isaac Abraham. Apologies, Isaac. And we had a chat on Twitter the other day. But yeah, so it's a tooling that's been written by Isaac, and it's open source on GitHub, as you saw, so anyone can contribute. And it uses the F# language to look at using or simplifying ARM templates and making the ARM template creation experience easier, but working alongside ARM. So what Farmer actually outputs at the end of the day when you come to deploy time is an ARM template, for the most part. There is some options we'll look at later, perhaps, about you actually using Farmer to do the deployment itself rather than generating an ARM template. But you know, behind the scenes, it's still using that. So we'll have a look and we'll see how Farmer works, and we'll have a play and see what it can do above and beyond ARM templates. So what we're going to do is we're going to run through the quick starts and get set up. So I haven't done anything really to get set up in advance. We're going to run through it all on the stream and hopefully make it work. So we are going to go ahead and follow the quick start. I don't know if I actually have .NET. I must have it. Yeah, okay. So let's give that a go. So let's get that set up, and we'll do. Try to spell .NET right. So that command there is just using the .NET CLI to create an F# application, nothing specific, the ARM template or Farmer related yet. We're just using the F# language. Now, if you're not familiar with F#, and I'm not particularly familiar with F#, but it's a .NET language, but it's a functional programming language rather than the C# and similar. So it if I've never written a program in F# before, but my understanding is you don't need to really know much F# to actually be able to use Farmer. So let's do the next step, and we'll add the Farmer package. So just add the NuGet package for Farmer. Okay, and we'll go ahead and open up Visual Studio. And we'll open that project. Now, I'm going to use Visual Studio because I've got it, and some of the IntelliSense and so on for F# will work better, but you are perfectly capable to do this in Visual Studio Code or other tools. That shouldn't be an issue at all. So, there we go. So what's next on the list? We're going to open program.fs and delete all the contents. Okay, we can do that. Okay, go on. And I say, at any point today, if you've got any questions or want to ask any infrastructure as code questions relating to what I'm doing or come completely different, then you feel free to just put them in the chat and I will answer them as and when they come up. Okay, so let's copy and paste from here. We'll just get this working first and then we can play about with it. So let's see what's what. And okay, so let's have a look at what we've got here. So the aim of this quick start is to, I think, deploy web application. So that's all we're doing is deploying an Azure web application. So let's look at the code. So first thing we're doing, we're creating the actual web app, and we're just passing in the name. So I think Farmer makes a lot of default choices for you if you don't specify them. So here we're just setting a web app. That's going to actually, I imagine, go and create not only the web app, but the app service plan behind it. It's going to select the plan type. It's going to select a lot of options for us. Now, perhaps we can go back once we've got this working. We'll go back and see about how we actually, make that, change that, and so on. But for the minute, we'll just run this. So we're creating a web app. Then we've got this concept of a deployment. So if you were writing an ARM template, obviously you would actually you wouldn't generally specify the resource group in the template unless you were creating a resource group. You would specify that at the command line when you run the deployment. But Farmer lets you actually run the deployment from inside the actual code. So here we're configuring our deployment option. So we want it in North Europe and we want to put it in a resource group. A resource group? I don't think that is. That's adding this resource to this deployment, and then this we can actually have it run it, and this is going to, I think, output this to an ARM template called my first template. Yeah, that will make sense. That's why we're not specifying the ARM template. Sorry. There are ways to have this actually run the deployment, I believe, directly rather than spitting out the ARM template, and we'll come to that, I guess, in a bit. So let's see if we can get this to work first. So we've got all that. So we actually want to run this. It's just it's an F# program at this point. So let me check I've saved that. Nope. So we're just going to run. And behind the scenes, obviously, there's some F# magic going on that's turning this into an ARM template, hopefully. Okay, so we should hopefully have, yeah, there you go, my first template.json. So let's open that up. And this has, in fact, gone and created an ARM template for us. And you can see there's a lot more to this ARM template than there actually is in the Farmer code. So what have we actually got? Okay, so the first thing we're deploying, yeah, so you can see we've got some dependencies. So this isn't necessarily in the order you perhaps would expect it to be. Yeah. So generally, when you're creating an ARM template yourself, manually you would put the server farm first, and then you would create the web app and so on. And you'd probably, the order of these properties, I'd probably have the type at the top and so on. So just a little bit, it took a minute to actually figure out what they are. But yeah, you can see here that we've got the normal properties we'd expect. So we've got a server farm. As I mentioned, it's made a lot of decisions for us, including it's picked a SKU and it's picked the free SKU. So clearly Farmer's got a lot of defaults that it will actually pick for us. Then we've got the actual web app. So yeah, type again is that the websites, and it's again made some decisions, quite a lot of decisions for us. So it's picked .NET Core as the actual stack. It's applied some default values for app settings. It's assigned it to that plan, which is expected. Let's put in North Europe because we specified that. It's not turned on managed identity. And I think, did I see? Yeah, so it's also created an insights component for us. Okay, so I think the best thing to do is actually now for us to run that and deploy it and see if that works. And we'll do that manually first, so we'll do it through here. So I'm going to create a resource group first. North Europe, showing where the actual resources are. Group, and we need the template file, which will be my first template.json. Okay, so we'll go ahead and deploy that. And that'll take a minute. And what I just quickly, while we're at it, is just quickly put out a Twitter tweet to let people know we're live, in case anyone else wants to join. Okay, so this has failed. Yeah. Okay, so it doesn't like the name. I guess somebody else has already used. So what we'll do is we'll come in and change. Any old name. Okay, and we'll run that again to regenerate the template. And let's see if that'll deploy. So there are some similarities here between between Farmer and Bicep. In particular, that the ARM template isn't something you generally would care about all that much. So it's being generated by, in this case, Farmer when you need it. So it's not something, if you're working on ARM templates, you will obviously save those files, put them in version control, those sort of things. But here, our actual source of truth is the actual Farmer application, and the ARM templates are just a means of deploying. So we don't really have to care about those. They're auto-generated. If we delete them or accidentally remove them, we'll just rerun the command and get it generated again. So they are disposable, if you will. So let's quickly go and have a look in the actual portal. Yep, go away. We should have our resource group. That's interesting. So it did deploy the first time, but didn't deploy the actual app. Interesting. Anyway, yeah. So it has deployed the actual farm plan. So let's get rid of these two, not to confuse things. And so we've got the actual plan, which we can see it's picked up the settings from before, so we should be on the free plan. If I could have got that from the overview page, maybe not. We see it. We're on the free plan. We've got the actual web application. It should be running. Yep. And we should be able to hit that. There should be anything in it, but it'll give us the default, hopefully. Okay, anyway, it'll take a minute to run. And then it's created also an App Insights instance, which is hooked up to this. So it should be hooked up to this web app. So let's just check. That has actually hooked it up. Yep, it's enabled. So yeah. And yeah, we've got the default application there. Okay, so that's interesting. That's our first one. So let's see what we can do with this. So first up, we want to let's look at doing something like let's change the plan. So I'm going to have a look back at the documentation. And what you've got down here somewhere, yeah, resources. So we can see the resources you can create with Farmer. So let's have a look at web app. Yeah, so we can see the different options here. So let's have a look. We want to create or change the service plan. There we go. Yeah, so service plan name is the name of the properties. Now, how do we check what the, well, I guess the values are going to be the same as oh, it's actually SKU that we want, not service plan. I guess service plan is referring to the actual farm. So SKU, the SKU of the service plan. Okay, so that's value there would actually set the name of the plan. We don't want that. We want to actually change values, and this seems to be an actual enum of some sort. So I don't want that. That doesn't seem to work. Okay, sorry, I just missed the question there from NASCO what I was looking at. So NASCO UK has asked a question. If you have pre-configured network, how do you manage resources with Terraform? How do your team work in Git? So you're talking about a scenario, and correct me if I'm wrong, so this is a scenario where you've got an existing network that somebody else manages, perhaps is created for you, so this is a virtual network or similar, and then you want to be able to deploy resources into that virtual network. Is that correct? Just shout if I'm not if I've got that wrong. But yeah, so if that's a scenario you want to deal with, then that's perfectly doable. And you mentioned doing it in Terraform, so I'll talk about it in Terraform. So Terraform has a concept of a data item. So you can use that to reference existing resources that are not inside the controlled by the particular Terraform you're doing and not in the state file. So you can create a network data object that you then pass in details of the network. So usually it's the ID. So let's quickly have a look, actually see what it requires. So if we look in the resources, and they've moved the Terraform documentation around recently. So let me just check. So there's the resources in here, and we actually do need the data objects. So let's. There we go. Sorry, data source. Wish they wouldn't move things around. Yeah, so we can look under data sources, and there should be an Azure RM, probably network, virtual network. Yeah. So if we have a look at this, you can create a data object, which you pass in the name of the network and the resource group it's in. Sorry, it's not the ID. But this then gives you a reference to the actual network that exists. So you don't have to create that network; it already exists. You just pass in those details. But now you've got this object, which is a Terraform Azure RM virtual network. So now when you want to go and let's say create a virtual machine that needs to be deployed into that network, you can use this data object as when you get the property of virtual network, you can say Azure RM, it's data.azure.rm virtual network.example.id or .name or so on, and you can use that. So as long as you can create a data object, you can then use that data object like you had created it, and then you can use that to deploy objects into that virtual network or wherever. So data objects, most resources have a data resource. You can actually use a data source. So that's how we deal with that. You also asked about how do your team work in Git. So again, Git with Terraform is an interesting one because there are a few paradigms that they sort of promote. So if you're building different environments using the same Terraform configuration, so you want to parameterize it and you want to pass in different properties or different variables based on which environment and so on. Then you have a couple of routes you can go down. You can create a completely different Terraform set of Terraform files for each environment, but then you're going to be duplicating data all over the place there, and it's going to be hard to maintain. So ideally, what you would do is you would create a configuration in Terraform. You would parameterize it using variables, and then you'd have a variable. You'd pass in the variables at runtime. So back to the question on Git. Generally, I would work in a way of I would have a Git repository for a particular project, usually trying to keep things that are the same life cycle together in the same Git repo, and I would then separate them by perhaps different areas. So if you want to break up your deployment to do, let's say, networking and then compute in separate deployments, then you can put those inside different folders in the same Git repo if you want, if they're related, and so on. There are a lot of different ways you can cut this up, and there's no one way that really works all that well. Not works so well, but all that is, the way you have to do it. So yeah, if there's anything more specific you want to know about Git, just put a question in. Okay, so back to Farmer. So we want to have a look at this. So I'm guessing the bit we're missing, what have we got here? So we've got Farmer build, we've not got farmer.web app. So maybe that's part of the issue. Again, this is probably where my F# knowledge. Okay. Let's just try this then. Let's see what happens. Okay, well, it's not erroring. It would have been nice if it gave us some IntelliSense there. I wonder if I'm missing something that it does not give me the IntelliSense. I'll have to have a look at that. Let's just try building it. See if that does it. No? Okay. Might have to figure that one out, but let's go ahead and run that again. And we'll have a look at the template again, and it should have updated the SKU on the plan to B1 basic. So we can then go ahead and deploy that In fact, let's not do that. So let's have a look at how we can deploy it from within the application. So I think I saw that up in the quick starts. Yes, deploying to Azure. Yeah, so you'll update the application to deploy the generated ARM template directly from Farmer. And we've skipped a step here, so I wonder if we perhaps... We'll come back to that in a minute. So let's do this. Yeah, so we're going to modify the deployment section. So instead of actually just spitting out an ARM template, it's going to basically create the ARM template and then generate a script, which is going to call the CLI. It's going to prompt me to log in, and then it should deploy for us. So let's go ahead and actually log in. I think I've accidentally opened Premiere there, so let's close that. I should already be logged in, I think, but let's see. Okay, so we're logged in. And then we want to amend this. Yep, so we'll go back to our program. So we're changing this last bit. So instead of, get rid of this. And we've got our resource script. So this is the name of the resource we're going to apply to. Okay, and so in theory, if we do .NET Run, that should actually deploy for us. So let's see how that's going. So if anyone's got a question, just put it in the chat. I'll be happy to answer it. And if not, we'll keep playing about with Farmer. So while that's running, let's pop back over here and see if we did miss something in here. So we've found the deployment. I'm going to add a storage account, add application settings to do the storage account, and set a dependency between the two resources. Okay, we probably should have done this, but I do like to skip ahead. Okay, so we're going to add a storage account. Now we're definitely going to change that name because storage accounts are globally unique. So again, we'll call it the same thing. Okay. Okay, so we're now going to add an app setting called storage key, and we're going to reference that. So this is the dependency piece. Okay. Oh. So the name of the app settings is just setting, and we're going to calling it storage key, and the value is going to be. If anyone spotted that, I'm doing that on the wrong object, so let's do that in the right place. And so that's going to be storage account dot key. Okay, now I think I've got something wrong here in Visual Studio or something, because I would have expected some sort of IntelliSense and that to actually work. Let's just check. No suggestions. Okay, that's a shame. Yeah, I don't care about that. So I might have to look into why IntelliSense isn't working with this. Okay, but that apparently worked. So we're going to run that again now that we've got this working. And that should set up that storage account. Okay, so this is maybe part of the problem. So storage account builder does not define the failed constructor or member key. Yeah. First, okay, well, this is just me being an idiot. So I need to refer to the actual variable name, not the type. try that again. Okay, I missed a step. Okay, yeah. In F# you need to define a value before you reference it, so the order does matter. Okay, I'm used to C# and other things where that doesn't actually matter, so let's do that. Let's try that again. And teach me not to read properly. And again, me not paying attention, so one more time. It's the joy of doing this live. If you've watched my videos, you'll notice that I cut out all the errors and the mistakes. Okay, that's failed now. The resource is not defined in the template. So this is an error basically. There's a dependency been added and it's complaining that dependency that the storage account is referring to doesn't exist. Let's have a look at the actual template. Okay, this has actually been updated, so we will do is we'll just quickly add that back in, comment that out so we can have a look at the actual template. Okay. So this is created an ARM template for us. It's added a dependency to the storage account. You can see there. That's correct. But it's complaining that the storage account doesn't actually exist. And you're not wrong. Yeah, it doesn't appear to have actually created the storage account. So what have I done wrong? Oh, yeah, I missed. Again, I should probably read through the whole document. What we've done here, we missed adding it, I think. So yeah, we're referencing the storage account. We need to add the storage account to the template. So we need another add. Okay, that is working with IntelliSense now at least, so that's good. So let's try that again. Apologies for the errors, it is a learning curve, but that's what the aim of these streams are, is to see how this sort of thing works in real life. Okay, so that's running now. Should create those. Again, any questions you've got, just throw them in the chat. Anything can be ARM templates, Terraform, Pulumi, Bicep, Farmer. I'll try and answer those. Anything you want to discuss about doing infrastructure as code in Azure, or even maybe more generic Azure questions if you've got them, I'll try and answer those. Just stick them in the chat and I will try and answer. So, Nasco, you ask a couple more questions. With Terraform and Ansible/Puppet, do you think it's achievable? Do you think what's achievable? Did I miss something? Let me know what you mean by that. Template specs, yeah, it's something that I've had a little bit of a play around with. I actually need to do a video on it, and I wonder perhaps that maybe that's a good topic for us to play about with on the live stream next week. We could look at template specs in more detail there because they are quite interesting. For those of you who don't know, template specs are a way to actually store your ARM templates in Azure so they can be consumed by other ARM templates. So in the past, if you wanted to have nested templates and so on, they needed to be stored somewhere like an Azure storage account or in GitHub or something. It was a bit of a pain. Template specs is a way to hopefully resolve that issue. So yeah, perhaps next week we'll have a look at that. And that was from Nathan, sorry. Yeah. So we'll have a look at template specs. But yeah, Nasco, can you give me a bit more detail on what it is you think is, you're asking, is it achievable? I didn't quite get that. Okay, so that's deployed. And hopefully, if we look in our resource group now, we should have a storage account. Yep. And if we look at our web app, we should have now a storage key, and that should hopefully have, yep, it's got the connection string from our storage account. So that did work. Yeah, so we've run through all of that. We've done the deploy to Azure piece, so that works. Okay, Nazca, I think, did you put a link in? Because I'm guessing it's not allowed the link because I don't have the link to what you're referring to. I don't think I blocked links, so in theory, it should have let you. But anyway, so I'm assuming it's probably a template that looks at, well, probably a configuration that looks at deploying VMs and then installing SharePoint on-prem onto those machines. So absolutely, you should be able to achieve that with those tools. So there is quite a clear line between infrastructure as code and configuration as code, at least I think. So Terraform and ARM templates and Pulumi, they all do infrastructure as code. They deploy the resources, they'll deploy VMs for you, but for the most part they won't configure the insides of those VMs. They won't install software in them and so on. There are some ways you can fiddle with that, but generally no. Whereas things like Puppet, Ansible, Chef, Salt, they are designed to pick up your VMs and install stuff on them. So quite often, it's quite common to use those two hand in hand. So you have, say, Terraform that deploys the virtual machine, and it configures the virtual machine in terms of having it onboarded into your configuration management tool. Most common, that's if you're using Puppet or Chef, that's installing the agent and configuring the agent. So there's Azure has some VM extensions that you can use to install the agent for both Puppet and Chef. Ansible is an agentless approach, so you just basically need to open the right ports to make sure the SSH or WinRM agent is WinRM service is running. But yeah, so you can then get to a point where you have your Terraform, deploy the VM, configure it, it gets onboarded into your configuration as code tool, and then your configuration as code tool will pick that up and actually start configuring it to do whatever you want. Make it a DC, make it an app server, and those sort of things. So you can have it do that. And you can have it do things like look at the tags, for example. So maybe you use Terraform to deploy the VM, and you tag it with a tag that indicates that it should be a DC. Ansible picks that up. It looks at the tag because it can see some of the Azure information. I'm not sure if Ansible can. I don't know if definite Puppet can because I've done that. And it will see, it figures that out. And then it applies to your configuration from Ansible to make it into a domain controller, and so on. And you do that on other machines. So absolutely, that's possible, and it's something I've done. Say Puppet is usually what I've used, but yeah, I've done it a few times now where quite a lot of times where you have it pick up and it configure the environment. So yes, you could have a fully automated environment as long as you can write code in either Puppet or Terraform to do everything, which you should be able to, I would have thought. Then yeah, I think you should be able to do that. Okay, so we'll look at the last quick start tutorial here. Farmicons and .NET make it template to make things started easier. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so this is, you remember before we did a .NET new F# application, just took a default F# application. Well, in theory, there is a template which should allow us to do that as a farmer doc straight out of the box. So that should give us some more information. So let's do that. So let's just create a directory for that. Do it for the template. And we'll do .NET new farmer. I've not gone into the folder, have I? So let's do that again. Let's try it one more time. Okay, yeah. Okay, so we've got the same setup, but this is now basically created this with some default examples and some of the farmer utilities imported and so on, so make it a bit easier to get started. Okay. Yeah, we can also configure it to use the CI option. Yep. And okay, and we should be able to actually configure this to use Azure DevOps pipelines to do the deployments for us as well, which we're not going to have time to look into today, but that should be feasible. Okay, so let's have a look at doing some more advanced stuff. What should we do? Let's have a look at an F# script in a container. Yep, so this is interesting. So the aim of this is basically to deploy a container instance in running an Azure. So that's your Azure container instance, your container as a service, and configure that to run a script that we want to use. So what we're going to do is we've got a script here, so we'll do that. And again, I don't claim to know F#, so we'll just add this. What do we call it? Main.fx. Okay. So yeah, we're going to create a container instance. It's going to need to include the .NET Core SDK. So we're going to use an image from Microsoft that's got the .NET Core SDK in it. So that should be fairly straightforward. So this bit is just deploying the Azure resource. So let's get rid of this. We need to have those two. Okay, so what we've got a container instance, or container group as they're called, with a name of my app. We're going to add an actual container. The name of the container is going to be FSI, and the image it's going to use is this, and it's going to expose port 8080 to the outside world. So that's fairly straightforward. And then what we want to do is we need to take that script and we want to mount the template as a secret string so that the file system can pick it up. We mount the F# script as a file name in the container group and mount the directory containing that as source. With this in place, we can also set the .NET FSI command to run the container. Okay, so we'll take the whole of that and overwrite it. So what's new here? We're adding a volume. So this basically tells the container to mount this script as a volume on the container. Now, this doesn't have access to this file. This file just exists on my local PC. It's not accessible to the container. So what it's actually doing is it's using the system.io read all text property. This is just an F# command. This is using native F# to actually just read this file and then basically pass that in as a volume, so a file into the actual template. So it's just passing that in as part of the actual deployment. We also add a command line, so this tells the container instance what to run when it starts, and we're passing in so .FSI and then run this script, and it then splits that on null, I assume, and outputs that as a list. I think again, my F# is not great. Yeah, and then we're just mounting the volume as well. So actually sticking the volume attached to the container. And then we're going to do the deployment. We're adding our containers to it. We're putting it in East US, which is fine. So let's go ahead and run that. Okay, anyone's got any questions about anything we're doing either today or just infrastructure as code in general, just put them in the chat. Okay, so that should have created a template. He says. So what have I done wrong here? It's not put it in here, is it? No. We haven't saved that, but that shouldn't have made a massive difference, I would have thought. That's obviously a different command to what we ran before, isn't it? Because when we ran that, we used. Well, we just put it in. Just put it in a. Oh, so we haven't actually done that part. So we've just created the deployment. We've not actually done anything with it. So that would make sense why it hasn't output anything. Yep, and we want to do that, and then that should work. Hopefully. Okay, so there we go. That's created the template. That's better. And you can see there, so we've got our container instance. It's creating the command. Oh, that makes sense now. So when we looked at the item here, you see here that it's splitting this. So the way that the actual ARM template works, each command's on a separate line. So I'm guessing is what is doing that and putting it into an array. We've got the image, ports, we've got the mount path for the volume, and then we should have the actual volume itself. And you can see it's taken the string here and actually encoded it as secret, and that will be in our template. And that creates the container group. So what we should then be able to do is do what we did before, and we'll again avoid having to run some PowerShell, and we'll actually just do it in the program itself. Put it in the same resource group, may as well. And we'll do that. And that should deploy it for us. So you can see one of the big benefits of using this sort of language in Pharma in particular, and what it talks about on its homepage, is the fact that this template, this is the ARM template, there's a lot of text in here. The amount of actual code we've written in the Pharma instance is significantly smaller. So you can see there's a lot, it's a lot simpler. You've also writing this in an actual programming language, so F#, which is, if you've ever looked at Pulumi, which is another language tool we can talk about at some point. Pulumi allows you to write deployments in other languages, C#, any .NET language. I suppose you could write F# in that, but it allows you to use actual programming languages you're familiar with. Now, if you look at the Pharma FAQ, it explicitly calls out Pulumi and says it's not trying to compete with Pulumi. It is not trying to be a language that can do everything. It is just Azure and ARM templates, and it is just F#. Say just, but yeah, it's not trying to compete with that. But there are some similarities, and there are some similarities obviously with Bicep in terms of the fact that it's simplifying ARM templates, but still using ARM templates and spitting out an ARM template that you can then use however you want. And if you have a look at the documentation I was reading earlier, now where was the piece I was looking at? Well, firstly, so there's a comparison here between ARM templates and Pharma, which is probably something worth understanding if you're thinking of looking at it. So you can see, what the difference is, and a lot of these, obviously, at the beginning they're the same. Pharma doesn't support linked templates, but as it mentions here, generally not required because of the way you're doing things. Because you're abstracting away the ARM template, one of the reasons you use linked templates in ARM is to either simplify things or to work where there is a need for nesting, so like deploying into different resource groups and subscriptions and so on. You wouldn't really need that because of the way Pharma works. As I mentioned, it's claiming to be easy to author and read compared to ARM templates, and you can see they're a lot simpler. They're a lot easier to read, a lot less code. Documentation, the website's got documentation, and IntelliSense didn't really work for me, so I'll have to figure out what I did there. I'm sure that's something I did wrong and nothing to do with Pharma. I think the ARM team have been doing quite a lot recently to try and make the documentation of ARM better, but it's a valid point that sometimes it's out of date, and editor support, VS Code. There is some support for ARM templates in Visual Studio, but it's pretty old, so it's not worth talking about. Type safety is quite a big one. So this should we should be able to spot errors that run the actual compile time rather than relying on the extension. So it's taking care of dependencies, composing resources, creating multiple resources. You can use, I haven't looked at it yet, but you can use a loop to create multiple resources. Yep. So, and I guess one of the one of the reasons why you might use this is obviously you are writing F sharp. So you can actually use some of the functionality of F sharp in your ARM template or in your program working around your ARM template as well. Yeah, and you can use external libraries and .NET applications. So you could have, if you're writing a .NET application, excuse me, if you were writing a .NET application that did some things and one of the things you needed it to do was actually create and deploy ARM templates, then using Farmer as a library could be a very easy way of having your application be able to do that. So yeah, some benefits there. Again, you can assess this against other tooling and whether you feel this is something that would be useful. But I think it's good to get an overview of what it can do. Yeah, so this is the bit I wanted to bring up. So there are a few different ways to actually use Farmer to do the actual deployments. So the first one is ARM templates are just a means to an end. So if you don't use ARM templates already, or you don't really have any urge to edit and work with ARM templates directly, then you can deploy directly through Farmer like we did there, and it will generate an ARM template at the back end for itself. It will deploy that, and then it will clean up after itself. You'll never see the ARM template, and so you can definitely do that, and you can have it do things for you. And the example here, this is, I guess, the power of having something that's actually using a full programming language. You can use Farmer to actually create the ARM template, deploy the ARM template, and then you can write code in your application to actually go and do something like deploy an application using a zip file. You can't do that easily in ARM templates. You can use deployment scripts, which is something we'll probably talk about at some point as well. But yeah, this is the benefit of having a programming language. The other thing is you've got ARM templates. In which case you can use Farmer to generate the ARM template. So you can write all your code in Farmer, you can have it generate an ARM template, and then you can deploy the ARM template that we saw. You could even take that ARM template and put it in your Git repos and so on if you wanted to, and just use Farmer as a sort of tool to create them. Or you actually want to handcraft your ARM template. So maybe you use Farmer as a tool to sort of rapidly generate a load of ARM templates to start with, and then your ARM templates become your source of truth after that. You check them into your Git repo and so on. You don't use Farmer again after that point, and you manually edit the ARM templates. Not sure that's a use case that will come up that often, but yeah, it's possible. So there's different ways you can do it. So yeah, we're getting up to the hour now, so that was just a very brief introduction to Farmer. It was good for me to do that. I've heard about Farmer, but I've not used it. I was having a chat on Twitter with Isaac the other day, and it encouraged me to have a look. So we've had a play about with it, and it was good fun. So if you've got any other questions or anything you want to ask before we go for today, just put it in the chat now. Otherwise, I will be dropping off in a couple of minutes' time. But yeah, this was the first session we've done since the one we did at Christmas for the Azure Advent Calendar. But hopefully people found it useful, and I will certainly be happy to do another one next week, and hopefully every week. And we can talk about some more things. So one of the things mentioned earlier was template specs. So maybe we have a look at template specs next week and figure out how that works and see what we can do with it. But if you've got any other suggestions or just questions you'd like to be picked up next week as well, you can just drop them on Twitter. So you can reach me at just at Sam Cogan. And if you want to have a look at Farmer yourself, this is the URLs here. So this is just on the GitHub docs, and you can grab that URL and have a go. So, any last questions before we go? What we haven't done is we haven't just checked our deployment to make sure that actually created our container. I didn't like the fact that we put it in a different location, so we will just quickly change that and run it again. Should have paid more attention. So hopefully that'll run now. And what we should see is a container instance hopefully appear in a minute. We'll just see that actually get created, and then we will call it a day. If you've just tuned in and missed the rest of the session, I will put the recording online, so you'll be able to pick that up on YouTube, and it'll also be on Twitch as well for 90 days. But the longer term one will be on YouTube, so feel free to have a look at those. Okay, so we've got our container instance. It's not started running yet. So let's see if it actually comes up. Okay, that should be running. I'm not sure if it'll actually respond on this, but let's have a quick look. There we go. Okay, it does respond. So, yep, that's up and running. And yeah, that's all worked as expected. Now, one thing you don't get with Armo, and because you don't get with ARM templates, is destruction. So if we want to get rid of all these resources, we're going to have to go in and delete the resource group. There's no destroy command. So we'll go ahead and do that and clean that up. So I'm not paying for those. And they will get deleted. Okay, I think we'll call that the show for today. If you've got any other questions that I wasn't able to answer today, or you didn't get time to put them in, just send them to me on Twitter, or come along next week at the same time and we'll have another go and we'll look at something else and I will answer your questions. Check out my blog as well if you're interested in some of the other articles I've written. You just go to samcogan.com. But hopefully I will see you here next week and we can have another good session looking at some more infrastructure as code in Azure. Have a great rest of your day and wherever you are, and hopefully I'll see you next time.